Welcome to What's Left, a weekly political discussion challenging the mainstream left. I'm Eduardo Abarca with Andy Lipson. Hi, Andy.
Hey, Eduardo. And why are we Skyping today?
We're Skyping because I'm in Madrid, Spain.
That's so awesome.
And you are you are in San Francisco.
I'm in the same old place, but once again, you are world traveling.
I apologize, but I appreciate, and I very much want to say over this episode, thank you to Kenny Cepeda for taking in or jumping in for me, and hopefully we'll have him frequently on What's Left for a future episode.
I think he's going to replace you permanently. You're gone.
Is that what you want, Andy?
No, that's not what I want. Because I know if I say that, you'll do it.
To know what Andy's intentions are.
No, but I agree with you. It was good having Kenny do this, and but I definitely like you and I doing this together. I'm not gonna. Well, I'll just say the most. This is the best.
I love Kenny being on that episode, and I think everyone should check out last episode. I just saw it yesterday, and it was such a great episode with Kenny being interviewed about his political journey, which I think we do some of. You have always said, I just want to briefly just talk about this, but you have always said that part of What's Left, you wanted to have real people be interviewed, real people and their political journeys be interviewed on this program, on this podcast / YouTube, because you feel that the revolution starts at the grassroots level with everyone else being connected to another person that looks like themselves, growing through this political journey. And I have wanted other more political activists or politicians to be interviewed on here. But we've made a compromise.
We compromised with no politicians.
All right. We'll see about that. We'll probably get some.
Maybe we'll see.
I have some connections.
Yes. So,
all right,
you're in Spain.
Yes,
and
I'm in Spain. And I'm out here in Spain and France for a month.
Okay, and I know that you sent me the desire to talk about two issues, but I do have some questions. Like the two issues you want to discuss, and I hope to discuss them, is the rise of the far right, this Vox party in the most recent elections, and what's behind that, and then issues of immigration that came up around that, and then the issue of Catalonian Independence, which is also featured as a piece of the rise of the right, of the Vox, the far right. Those are two things that you asked me to kind of think about, read about, sent some articles. So that'll be the meat of what we want to talk about. But I would like to spend a little time asking you some questions about your travels in Spain, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I'm all right with that. If you want to, I have traveled to Spain on and off throughout the years, and I have seen gradual changes over time, like one that we're not going to discuss so much about today, but like the rise in this tourism that exists here in Spain.
Mm-hmm.
And, I have traveled to Europe since I was an adolescent, and I have seen, especially after the tech boom with applications such as Airbnb and BlaBlaCar and Uber and other applications here in Europe that are now being used, just changes that are happening. But we won't discuss the tourism part right now. I'm just saying that I've witnessed firsthand experience changes, gradual changes. And immigration happens to be one of them, and as well as a sentiment of nationalism.
Well, the tourism thing you're raising, though, is that almost like an aspect of of a corollary like gentrification that is occurring in cities, where it's becoming essentially a city for wealthier people whether it's wealthier people locally or wealthier people from outside, it's becoming a city more where wealthy people can live and less where people of more modest or working class people have more of a struggle to live?
Yeah, it is. I mean, is this a question you want me to delve into?
Yes.
Yeah? Well, yeah. The economy here in Spain after 2008
Yeah.
has really dwindled down. And most Spanish folk, even if they have a university degree, are having a hard time finding a proper job so that they can they can do according to their profession that they studied, and that's the economy is not able to do it. So they are leaving Spain, right? They are going to Germany, and they're going to the UK, and with Brexit that will change in the UK. But yes, so here the economy went down, and then you have a lot of uh, people struggling to survive, the working class here, trying to survive and to meet their basic needs, such as their housing or even just the food and and when you have a lot of tourism, right, for really wealthy people uh, alquilando, renting out flats, not to local people, but to tourists
Mm-hmm.
that come from the outside using applications like Airbnb,
Yep.
then you push the people out, even immigrants out.
Yeah.
Anyone who lives here in Spain trying to make a living, you push them out, and you have people coming into from outside, coming into what used to be a very quaint neighborhood, a Spanish neighborhood in Madrid, and the center of Madrid. Slowly, you're pushing everyone out to the outskirts of Madrid, the city. And this is happening in Paris as well, where I was last week. But we won't discuss Paris right now. But I'm just saying, like, tourism is definitely pushing out people. And gentrification is happening. It is another form of gentrification, yeah? The tourism industry is a form of gentrification, as well as the changing in demographics and neighborhoods and the wealthier class moving into areas that were normally working class on the outskirts of a city like Madrid. So yes, it is a contribution.
Well, the
That
reason,
I'm seeing.
and look, who knows what we're going to talk about today, and I know that we came
Right.
up with an agenda, but obviously this discussion we just had bears on all the developments that you're talking about, the rise of Vox and the election results, then the question of independence for Catalonia, which I think is a corollary to that. But I think one of the I think it's important for people to understand that these processes that are happening in our country and in our cities are global. Like that, this isn't just the gentrification is happening everywhere. That's happened and looks maybe a little different because I don't think we talk about tourism in San Francisco or Oakland as an aspect of gentrification, but actually it is.
Yeah.
And but it's even more obvious in a place like Spain, which is a place with beautiful architecture, with a massive
Yeah.
amount of history to it and culture that people want to see, and people want to be like, oh, this is a location within Europe that can be a base of operations for seeing the rest of Europe as well. So people who have the money and the means to travel will want to go to Spain, and
Mm-hmm.
so I just think it's important to recognize and acknowledge that this stuff that's happening is global, just like the rise of nationalism is global. It's because it's driven by the same economic forces.
Yeah. It was very difficult for us when I was growing up to come to Europe. It was very expensive. Now you can get. I have seen even. I'm not lying. Some tickets like $200 just one way ticket,
Wow.
$160 ticket just to Paris or Madrid. And I mean, if you go during the season, I'm just not talking about. I'm talking about just I have seen these tickets. So I think that profit-driven applications, with industries, you're just always going to make a way to have more people go to a place where it's like Disneyland now. Barcelona, Venice, Madrid, they're becoming like Disneyland
Yeah.
towns to tourists, and and it's all because of the idea of fast tourism. It's like fast food, right? It's like fast tourism, but driven by capitalism, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And where specifically are you located?
Right now, I'm in an area south of the center of Madrid, which is a working class neighborhood, like almost like a mini Chinatown area, but as well as lots of immigrants from Latin America. I see a lot of Venezuelans here, Andy. I mean, we've had episodes on Venezuela and what is going on. There are so many Venezuelans here and Colombianos. There are so many people here. There are from other countries as well. I saw some people from Mexico as well immigrate here, but mostly from Venezuela. They're coming in by thousands, yeah.
Oh.
And
what do you think the basis of that specific connection is?
I think that it's what's happening with in the government of Maduro. I remember we've talked about.
But I guess what I mean is, why is it that so many Venezuelans are going to Spain versus, say, are they also going to France?
Well, they are going to Colombia.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah, but Colombia is nearby. Like that's why specifically Spain? Do you think?
I think because it is very difficult to travel to the USA to get asylum now, and before as well. It was very difficult, and it's easier to go to Europe. As a Mexican, if I didn't have a US citizenship, I could go to France a lot easier than I can go to the USA just to visit as a tourist.
I see.
Because I don't need a visa to see France, but I need a visa and whatever documentation and all the stuff and love to take to go visit my family if I was to visit my family in the USA. Right. So South Americans and Mexicans and Central Americans can visit Europe and stay in Europe a lot easier than they can going north to the USA.
Okay.
But there are more illegal ways to enter the USA because there isn't it's just there's just different ways and routes to get through illegally.
Right.
And I think most people think of the USA because it's just the neighbor up north.
Yeah.
And going across the Atlantic, you're farther away from your families.
Yeah. And maybe it's also because there's a version of Spanish spoken there, so it's like among the European countries. Okay.
And thank you for that. I missed that point. The other night, I was actually talking to a Colombian about this, and I was saying, "Why Spain? Why did you choose?" She said, "Oh, it was practical. It's not like I have to learn a different language. It just seems like I was the first in my family to immigrate outside of Colombia, and so I decided Spain because it was just practical and it's a first world country. And if I wanted to, it's closer to other countries that I could just immigrate to. But it's also because it's a Spanish-speaking country. So yes, for a practical reason, yes, that's one of the reasons I was speaking.
Yeah, that was what I was asking, but then it kind of started to dawn on me a little bit. And anything else as you've been down? I mean, you visited a few times that strikes you when you've visited this time?
Yeah, something that I'm seeing is, I don't know if it's, maybe I wasn't, I think I was paying attention a lot when I was an adolescent, but there's just the topics of independence or the topics of immigration and Islamophobia, they're very polarizing topics. You can go here to a taberna, or you can go, which is like, you go into a restaurant, or you go into a bar, or you go into, just go into the city center, to a mercado, a market, and you just talk to any Spanish person, and these topics are very charged, and I didn't feel like they were this charged before.
Yeah.
After 2015, these topics are very polarizing. And the independence movement is really, really polarizing, especially to a lot of Madrileños here, people from Madrid. They feel that Catalonians want to split the country. And if that happens, then other regions, like the Basques, like that, and like the people from Andalusia, uh, will start as well wanting to, everyone will start to want their independence. And what will happen to Spain as an identity? And they don't want that. People want to be united as one. And this is what Vox actually wants as well. But the immigration issue, they will ask me personally, they will ask me if I'm visiting or if I'm living here. And I say, well, I'm visiting. Then they will say, oh, okay. Then they can comfortably say to me what their thoughts on immigration is.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've noticed this difference.
Yeah.
Because if I was living here, then they're going to sort of say things in a way that doesn't make me, offends me. And I've tested this out. But they have stated their opinions on it. And they don't want any more immigrants, especially not from Asia and Asia, and especially not from Northern Africa, or just the Middle East, which is a lot of Middle Easterners here.
Right.
It's some of the things that they are saying make me cringe.
Before
It's a
you,
lot of
can I just stop?
yeah.
Now, when you say they, what you're kind of getting at is the vast majority of people, maybe even everyone you talk about, but maybe that's what you mean by they, right?
Yeah, I should clarify. In Madrid, it's liberal, but there are people that I have spoken. Excuse me. There are people that I've spoken to that are Spaniards, just Spanish, that are just not. That they are. I have to be careful here because otherwise, I could just see if this is in 2-3 years this video gets traction, then the comment section will just go.
Whatever.
So, it's like saying, yeah, hold on, Andy. Let me be careful, please. I do want to take this slow. I don't want to say something I'm going to offend. There are Spaniards that are nationalists that I have spoken to that I'm referring to when I have said that they feel immigration is a big issue for them, and they don't want immigration.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to say, from my vantage point, it's just to be accurate
You're right.
to say who you're speaking
Very
about, because I think it's very easy to just, that's one of the problems in the United States is when we say they support Trump, and there's just like immediately a picture comes into mind that it's all the same person, and there's a lot of different reasons people might support a character like Trump.
You're right.
I just don't want to let people fall into the same trap because I'm much less familiar with politics in Spain, so Well, I agree with you though that I imagine you're paying more attention, but you mentioned it as 2015, but I would suspect this polarization you're describing, this polarized environment, is what you said earlier is really much more a result of 2008. From what I heard, youth have 50% unemployment now.
Yeah.
Social services are being eroded dramatically, and
Yeah.
the whole American model is being pushed forward even more quickly, where a government which used to be seen as responsible for having pensions for people, for making sure people had some either job or welfare if they didn't have a job, all that is now up for grabs and has been harshly eroded since 2008, as I understand it.
Yeah. That's when it really was, when it's the European Union. Spain was one of them, and Greece was another of those countries that were really struggling with their economy.
Right.
Yeah.
But in a similar way that I've also heard there have been since 2008, there has been a rise in the number of billionaires in Spain. And just like the United States, the banks and the wealthy who were responsible for the crisis and who made off like bandits through the crisis, who then got rich in recovering from the crisis, are now being able to cast off all blame for this and push it on to other groups.
Yes, which is another reason why Vox has become popular, because they are also claiming to fight political corruption,
right?
Which is one of their reasons for.
And if I remember right, that one of the left-wing parties, Podemos, really got its start in around 2008, 2010 in terms of gaining power and things like that. And once again, a so-called socialist-like party disappointing people.
Yes.
And leaving.
Yes. Yeah. And we should refer our listeners and viewers to an episode that we had done about this on left-wing political parties that are slowly not, I wouldn't say dying down, but are, what would be a good appropriate word for it, Andy? They're not being replaced either, I feel. They are being just they're being competed with other far-right political parties.
It's being exposed as shams, being exposed as completely incapable of delivering what they promised, being exposed as liars, and people looking for somebody who's going to be more truthful and who seems like they're going to stand for what they say they're going to do. Vox, that's how Trump has been successful. That's how Vox has been special. That's how Boris Johnson has been successful. That's how Bolsonaro has been successful. So the rise of the right is in relationship to the failure of the left to deliver on its promise of socialism, people, because every time it was promising socialism, it was delivering more capitalism, because it tried to avoid this question of insurrection. It tried to avoid this question of the centrality of the working class. It tried to avoid the question of dictatorship of the proletariat or dictatorship of the capitalists. And if you're going to bring socialism, but maintain the dictatorship of the bourgeoisie, you aren't bringing socialism. That has to be brought down. And that's why we are now stuck with people who think that some form of nationalism is going to get them what they want, which it won't, because the only thing that will deliver working class people where they really want to get to is internationalism. But that means shattering of all nations, and shattering of all those national boundaries, and recognizing that none of us as workers will benefit from being held within our national boundaries and essentially put in work camps by our local bourgeoisie.
Yes, I agree with you. It's confusing, I think, when we have so-called socialist political parties running on this platform, really trying to promote liberal policies that are looked at, or that are presented as wonderful policies, but then they don't get, the people's needs are not being met, and then they are considered, like you're saying, shams. I wanted to point out something, if I may, just because I looked up something, and we are now at a very interesting point here in Spain, watching this political Vox party rise. As we saw in the last episode that we had done, we had seen that they were rising, and that was in April of 2019 in the general election. The party obtained 10.26% of votes and electing 24 deputies, entering the Congress of Deputies for the first time in history. And this was the very first time that they were really being considered as a serious group, because before that they were a joke. Right. They were not seen. They were like a fringe group, right? And then slowly they started gaining traction. There was the April election, the general election, and then there was another general election in November, because the political parties couldn't find a way to unite, to come to an agreement. So they had to do another election in November. And this election was when we started to see Vox really, really rising with an increased number. And in the second general election of this year, in November, excuse me, Vox came in third and increased its number of deputies from 24 to 52.
Right.
And it was the most voted party in the region of Murcia and the autonomous city of Ceuta. So what you're saying earlier about how people are disenchanted by the liberal political parties, Podemos, el Partido Socialista, as well, the Socialist Party, then they're now shifting their focus over to this other political party, Vox. And it's like, to some people, it's almost bringing some of the Franco ideas back, which are scaring people, which is a very charged topic to discuss about, because Franco is was some dark past of Spain's past.
Yeah, no, and there's people who are now speaking fondly of elements of Franco's regime, particularly the ability of Franco to crack down and deal with the level of instability, to deal with these independence movements that they think threaten to fracture Spain into a thousand parts, as well as crime that people are talking about. Crime that they most, from what I'm hearing, I saw this news article or news snippet, where it's like, oh, immigrants, I'm not against immigrants, but illegal immigrants come in here and they're squatting, illegally, or squatting in territory and bringing down the property values, and there's more criminals out there. Imply again the implications that immigrants are bringing some of that in. So it's that's what I hear is on the rise, is people basically being squeezed in the vice of capitalism, and the left having no answer for that. In fact, only having compromise and actually saying they're going to deliver some level of relief from that, but not, and then trying to make excuses as why they can't. And then people are tired of excuses. They want to see results, and this is what parties like Vox are promising. Well, I don't think they'll deliver, just like Trump hasn't really delivered for the working class here. But I suspect they will do some things where they'll keep some promises, and that's what Trump has done. Trump has kept promises, and he will gain from that. It's the reason I think he's going to win the 2020 election, and no matter about impeachment and things like that. And I could see that Vox, if it carries on in this way, and the left continues to offer absolutely no alternative, because what I've heard is, since that, what has happened is Podemos, which is to the left of PSOE, the Socialist Party, has now said they want to form a coalition with PSOE, has even said we have to now tamp down some of our more left-wing stuff that we were saying. We need to move to the right in order to deal with this new threat of the rising far right, in order to build coalition with sort of more centrist socialists. And once again, it's like, you didn't even deliver when you were in power. Now, well, they're still trying to form a coalition government, but now you're moving even more to the right. So it's just, it's like the left has no backbone. The left has no, and if you give up on revolution, you can't have a backbone. That's the only basis for having a vertebrae, is the idea of not just revolution, but insurrection, the idea of, needing to take the government down by force of workers, armed workers, and establish a new kind of government, establish a new kind of system. That is the only way socialists can offer a vision, is if they keep that North Star in front of ourselves. And each time they've given up on that and try to say there's some slower, more safer road to get there. And every time you try to go that slow, safe road, you end up just creating this disappointment, which leads to the rise of the right.
Is what you're saying then, just to be clear for our audience and viewers, it isn't about investing our time within the current system that we have in elections, and even voting for some of the left-wing political parties that are, for example, here in Spain, Podemos, which is left-leaning, and the Partido Socialista, which is a socialist party.
Yeah, and much more so to even say that not that, but you have to say, well, what are we for? And you have to say, we are for breaking up the nation state of Spain. We aren't for maintaining that. We are for building international working class solidarity. And part of that is if the workers in Catalonia want independence, they have the right to that independence. And while simultaneously knowing that if they do gain the independence without getting rid of capitalism, that they're just going to be subordinated to their own bourgeoisie in those countries. And so those workers will be no more independent than workers in Spain. But there is no benefit to workers basically saying, I will allow my bourgeoisie to enslave you, and I'm going to get behind my bourgeoisie doing such a thing. That part, that's the chauvinism, that's the nationalism that socialists cannot have any part to. So we simultaneously I believe socialists have to support the right of the Catalonians to independence while laying out the idea that independence is not going to deliver them anything unless they're ultimately working class internationalism leads to an overthrowing of all these bourgeoisies, all these capitalists. But again, I think we can't act like this notion of preserving the nation is somehow in the benefit of workers. It isn't. Well, I have a question, but I'll let you respond to this if you want.
Yeah, I wanted to touch on something that I have been talking with people with Spanish descent that have had their ancestors have been of mostly all from the Iberian Peninsula and not from other countries, mostly from Iberian Peninsula. And so I'm not sure if I want to talk there yet, if you have something else to bring up, because it's about the immigration issue and you're talking about international working class. There is still this thing that people feel around feeling that they are being overtaken by other ethnicities and feeling like they are being slowly outnumbered.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure if we want to take it there yet.
No, go ahead.
Go ahead. Have something else. Yeah. So it's really this sentiment that Europe is. I keep hearing in France and in Spain and other parts of the country, other parts of the continent, where people are feeling like they're being overwhelmed with so many other countries from Africa and from Asia, and here in Spain, Latin America. Although some people in Vox have stated, I saw an article where the right kind of immigration should come from Latin America here in Spain, but not from other countries. And I would just blatantly say, I think what they mean from Black African countries. Mm-hmm. And if we were to have an international working class really work together, it's some of these some of the Spanish that I've spoken to, they feel as if they're slowly going to be wiped out. So that slowly wiped out from being an actual Spanish European person from an ethnic background that's European, and that the rest of the immigrants that are in Spain are having more children, and the Spanish don't have as many children as the immigrants, and so they feel as if they are slowly going to be overtaken, and they may not want to vote for Vox, but they do feel as if they are slowly losing their Spanish ancestry here in Spain, and so. I don't know if you want to make a response to that first.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's true. What I mean when I say it's true is that real internationalism has no interest in not just the nations of the present, but the nations of the past. The Spanish national past is a past of imperialism, of slavery, of colonial plunder into South America, in Africa. That, just like the United States, right? And the United States just happened to be the big dog that got over on everyone the biggest. And so it's now the most dangerous terrorist. but the Spanish bourgeoisie is a terrorist nation. Um, and I don't mean a terrorist nation of people who are from Algeria. I mean the bourgeoisie are the terrorists there, just like our own bourgeoisie are the biggest terrorists on the globe. And so all that stuff has to go. Like, and any worker who holds on to that, notion of trying to preserve it, they might think that they're preserving something for themselves, but they're not. They're preserving something for their own capitalist class. They're preserving the right of their capitalist class to continue to plunder them and plunder others. Um, and so that notion of I'm going to hold on to that Spanish past or hold on to that cultural that has to go. Just like we don't have kings and queens anymore, except in only in name. That went historically. That went. Well, so will that. And unless workers are willing to jettison from that, then we will never see the world that is the only world that can deliver us from these problems. Now, it is not just that notion of holding on to that cultural thing that's the problem. There's obviously a repressive state apparatus. There are all sorts of social controls. There's competition between workers for the limited jobs that exist that cause us to see each other as enemies instead of as potential
Yes.
allies.
Yeah.
So all those things exist under the rubric of capitalism. But that riddle cannot be solved within the confines of workers thinking of themselves as keeping themselves protected under a national umbrella. If you do that, the best you will get is what it has delivered. It's a national socialism. And I don't just mean that in terms of national Nazis, but there's no socialism in national socialism. It's the opposite of socialism. It does end up turning into something like fascism if you try to do it in this way. So workers are going to have to abandon what I would say is that backwards idea. And that's not just among far right people. That is among liberals. All right. That's why
Yeah.
when we talked in our previous episodes, we said the only position you can take that is a consistent position that will lead to a solution to this quote problem, which the problem is poverty, the problem is profits, the problem is war, the problem is racism. The only solution is no borders, internationalism. Anybody is welcome to come anytime they want, and the only restrictions I'm going to put restrictions on capital. I'm going to put restrictions on the capitalist, on their right to have profits, and I'm going to take that from them ultimately. And the only way you can get that is through internationalism, is joining with your brothers and sisters across the border, because as soon as you try to fight your capitalist, they will use the poverty of your brother and sister across the border to pit their situation against yours. So unless you join with them, you're cooked. But thinking of Spain of old and wondering for the bygone era, it's like, what about the American Revolution? What did our forefathers want? It's the same backwards way of thinking, thinking that there's some bygone era you can go into the past. There is no way backward, and our present is ruled by a present of capitalism. So the only way out is socialist revolution, dictatorship of the proletariat, and international insurrection. That's it.
Yeah. Yeah. I before I gave my response, I wanted to hear yours.
Yeah.
I do hear what people are trying to say, and they say it in subtle tones as well,
Yeah.
subtle ways, that they are feeling that their ancestry is slowly being wiped out, or their cultural past is being wiped out. They're feeling threatened, even amongst liberals, that they're saying this. And my response is that this purity that people are trying to hold on to, it just doesn't exist. Even if you think the Spanish are pure, there isn't anyone of us that are pure. I mean, I'm Mexican, and as much as I'm proud and I say that I'm Mexican, I myself am not even a pure Mexican, as my DNA says accounts for, right? If I could take in my DNA, which I now regret having it because now the government asked my DNA. But do you know what I mean? It's like I'm not even, like, I have Scottish and Irish and Basque and even some Senegalese in there inside of me, that I doesn't really have anything that is really native to Mexican, the land of Mexico, my response is that, the same thing with the French, the Romans and came and to France area. The Muslims came over, and there was a time period when lots of Middle Eastern Muslim countries were immigrating a long time ago in the Iberian Peninsula. So that mixed in with other of the regions from, and so there isn't this pure ethnic Spanish race that exists.
Yeah.
Immigration is just, that's my response is that immigration is just another wave that's happening at this moment in time in history, that our 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 ethnic background will slowly start shifting again. It's just normal. It has happened in the past, and it will happen again, and it will happen in the future. So that's this is, and I expect it will happen even more so, and it's a beautiful thing. I think if we don't have borders, right?
Yeah, but it is important to recognize that this immigration wave is driven by a profit system, is driven by imperialism, which,
Yes.
like when you talk about Venezuela and you talk about the U.S. state, and you talk about the U.S. state, how it's used the IMF and World Bank to control the economies, its control of Saudi Arabia to sink the economy of Venezuela, that then drives Venezuelans to Spain, as well as attempting coups in those countries and attempting to militarily intervene. That this this immigration wave is occurring under the cauldron of capitalism, under the cauldron of the profit system. It's not just people moving around freely. Let's be clear.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that pressure cooker that people in Spain are feeling, that's leading them to think of that person coming across the border as an enemy, is actually a pressure cooker that we are all in, except for the capitalist. They aren't in it. They're the ones turning the temperature up. They're the ones benefiting from it. And for us to think, that's why we have to understand this immigration wave as part of a common, when I say common, it's part of a common malady, not the malady of immigration, but the malady of poverty, the malady of colonial wars and imperialism that will not be solved unless we join with that person who's also experiencing it. And if we see them as our enemy, then we will continue to fall for this trap of thinking that of misidentifying who our opponent is and what system we're actually fighting. Because I think even in a world that's completely fair and where everyone's needs are taken care of, there will be immigration, and there will be culture too. I think it will be a different culture. I think it will be closer to world-like cultures, and what does it mean to be working class? But there will be pasts. There'll be echoes of our past that are still resonate in those initial post-revolutionary societies. But ultimately, that will be a residue that I do think will drift away. And what culture means in a society that is not class divided, that doesn't have a minority in power above everyone else, we'll see. We'll see. But national culture is a culture of exploitation. It's a culture of colonial domination. It's a culture of imposing one country, imposing its will on several other countries, and that's not for workers. There's nothing to celebrate in that. I mean, there's only something to be stopped, defeated, and put an end to once and for all. And if we don't put an end to it, capitalism, I do believe, will put an end to itself through bitter war. That's my belief.
Yeah, and I think that the other part I should mention, that I do run into these conversations with people when they start complaining about so many refugees, so many immigrants coming here, is that these countries are the ones that are bombing those countries that people are fleeing from, such as Syria. These Middle Eastern refugees that are coming here into Europe, we have to acknowledge that the people who are coming from there are coming from war-torn countries that Europe, NATO, the USA are bombing.
Yep.
And it's because of these countries here in Europe that those people are fleeing.
Right.
So our blame, it's so easy to point fingers at the people that are coming, that are changing the demographics of a city or changing the culture of a neighborhood. And we are told that the immigrants are the boogeyman, right?
Yep.
But it's really the people at the top that are making these wars and playing with our lives, right? So that's what I remind people when I'm here talking to when we're having these discussions.
Yeah. One question I have Is Spain in European Union?
Yes. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
is there a drive to? So we've seen it in Britain, in Italy, I think, in
The
France.
exit span.
Is there
What is
a
Spanish?
spexit? Is there a
Spanish.
sentiment for leaving European Union as well?
Not as strong, but yes,
Okay.
there are. There are. Yeah, not as strong, but yeah, there are. And I think that right now Vox has some, just recently had some of their members in the European Union membership. So I'm wondering if they're for, this is one thing I should have researched, but I'm wondering if they're for exiting the European Union. Why would they be putting in some of their political party in the European Union to have a voice in there? So, uh,
Right. And here's the interesting thing, because for the same reason, I support Catalonian independence in the same way that I actually would say if the British want to get out of European Union, they can do that. You know, no illusions that that's going to solve their issue, but that's their right. But it's very interesting to me that I imagine there's elements of Vox that very much are like get out of European Union, but at the same time will
yeah,
say Catalonia has no right to have independence, and that to me
yeah,
is it's completely contradictory.
yeah. They just sued. What they're not just, but they had sued when there were independents. They were trying to independencize themselves. Uh, they're not for independence of Catalonia. So
No,
this
no,
is
I understand that, but I'm saying that I imagine Vox, the people supporters of Vox and Vox politicians are probably ones who would be calling more for getting out of European Union.
yeah, yeah,
That kind of
yeah.
Spanish nationalism, but at the same time, not not it's a contradiction if they don't support Catalonian
Yes,
independence,
yeah,
because the claim that the Catalonians are making is no different than the claim that the Spanish will be making in terms of European Union, being unelected, not representing us, dictating from afar our future. We want to get control of our own lives. That's the same claim being made by Catalonians within Spain
hmm
and possibly people in the Basque region, and it's it's equally true.
And as a socialist, what is your position on independence movement?
You mean for like Brexit and things like that?
Yeah, or
It,
first with with Catalonia.
totally support it. I mean, uh, meaning, if I was if I was a worker in Spain, and if I was not Catalonian, I would say, yeah, you have every right to that freedom. I'm against my government restricting you from voting, from putting you in prison for voting some of that way, which is what I heard they did. But not
Yeah,
just that, you have the right to that independence, and I don't give a crap about the Spanish integrity because it's actually true. It will undermine the ability of the Spanish ruling class to exercise authority and power within the European Union if it starts to crack up like this. They're right. The Spanish bourgeoisie is right to be worried about this, but I don't care about their fears. I care about the working class, and I and that notion of the right of independence and self determination is a very important one because the drive towards workers taking up the nationalist cause is completely antithetical to what we need. It's like it will mean that we will move in the wrong direction if workers start to take up nationalist causes,
yeah,
our own nationalist causes. But I
yeah,
do support other people, other workers in their right to independence. And it's something I would agree on even under socialism, particularly under socialism, that of course we would want international working class and associations of all sorts, but people should have the right to that independence. And those associations have to be formed uh, out of actual democratic desire to associate, not out of it being imposed.
mm-hmm. And even though it might be driven though with Catalonian cultural, uh,
It will have that. It's going to
okay,
be and there'll be elements of the right in Catalonia that are pushing for that drive. It's not just
yeah,
left Catalonians.
right, exactly. I was
Yeah,
just going to point that out.
yes, absolutely. That's going to be the character of it. But as a Spanish worker, if I was a worker in Spain, not a Catalonian, I think
Right.
the right thing is to say yes. That's going to, but that is our job as the working class is to build those links, those left, those true left links of internationalism in the context of me saying no, you have the right to independence. So if the left is doing its job and not fooling itself into forming these um, pseudo-socialist. They're not socialist. They're capitalist state formations that they try to rule under socialist name. Then socialism's always going to be a lie. It's always going to be a disappointment. It's always just going to deliver people into a weak tea capitalism that does workers no good, and we will never see what we need to see. But if I actually, basically combine my saying the right of people to have their own independence with the desire to build an internationalist fight that overthrows my own bourgeoisie, then I think we have a shot.
All right. Then it might be controversial for you to even say that you support Brexit then, because a lot of people would see it as a form of racist policies trying to be enacted.
Yes, and I think people on the left have either tried to stay out of it sometimes, not talk about it, or just criticize the anti-immigrant sentiment that drives some of it. But the fact is that if workers vote to get themselves out of it, then they have that right. I mean, democracy under capitalism is still a sham, but I'm not interested. I'm not going to say that the European Union has the right to impose its will on any section of the working class anywhere. Now, British workers are going to find themselves subject to their own capitalist class, and the British capitalist class seems to be making more associations with the U.S. ruling class. Right? They're trying to make their own deals now with people like Trump and Boris Johnson talking together. There's no future for them in that. Internationalism is still the only way. But I would just say I wouldn't invalidate the British. I wouldn't invalidate that vote and say, no, you can't do it. European Union will be is the future, and there's nothing you can say about it. I don't agree with that.
Okay. I don't think you've said that before when we had our episode on Brexit.
Yeah, probably not as succinctly, but that's been my thought about it. Yeah.
All right. So we even covered some of Brexit.
Yeah, there we go. Look, hitting all the notes. Do you have thoughts about Brexit? I mean, what about your own thoughts about Catalonia?
To say, at one point, even Jeremy Corbyn supported getting out of the European Union.
Yeah.
And he had tried to stay away from those previous comments of his before, but I think it's because he is trying to align himself to the rhetoric of the liberals, that feeling that Brexit equals anti-immigration,
right?
Which is what most people conflate as, right?
Yeah.
But it really is, if it's something that the people, and I agree with you, but I don't say it right out. I'm more careful, because I think when people hear Brexit, it's so, again, it's another one of those very controversial topics. If you say it, you're immediately thought of, you're for keeping the immigrants out of out of the UK.
Right.
And that's why it's hard to talk about it. But yes, if the working class say, I don't want to be a part of the European Union, not because anything about the immigration aspect to it, but because the European Union is another force that's trying to impose their policies, their capitalistic agenda over this country, over the people, then and it doesn't make sense to be part of the European Union.
Right.
But I don't think that's how most people think of it, Andy.
Yeah. No, and I agree. And well, I mean, can I ask you what are your thoughts on the question of Catalonia? And independence.
Oof, okay, people are going to get me on the record here.
You're in Spain. You can actually get beaten up. Good.
Look, I have a friend in Barcelona, and his name is Carlos, and I support the independence movement, not so much because of their pride as Catalonian people, but rather as people that feel they have a right as a whole, as a community, to say, all right, this is not working for us. Your government, these policies, the austerity measures, everything in this system is not working for us. We're going to do something else for ourselves as workers. Yes, yes, as people, as yes. But I feel some of it is driven by this their own national point of view,
Yeah.
and that is what the counter. That's where they're hitting and other they're fighting with other Spanishes because there is this the Spanish that want to keep within the Spain are wanting to remain with this nationalist view, the unity, right? And the Catalonians that want to leave, they want to keep their identity as Catalonians, which I think is it's a it's a it's a nice thing, but I think we have to look beyond the Catalonian identity. We have to look beyond that. We have to look about how the Spanish government isn't really in the interest of the Catalonian people.
Right.
Yeah, more than its identity. It's beyond identity. I'm trying to get at.
Right.
Yeah,
Well, and I think that you some of the articles you sent me. One was from the Party of Socialism and Liberation, had an article about,
yeah,
and they quoted
yeah,
from Lenin's writings about self-determination, and I thought it was a good quote because I actually think Lenin talked about the right of self-determination of workers, even if that meant that you were still going to be under your own bourgeoisie, that there was something inherently democratic in that fight for independence over a larger oppressor, and said that the right of self-determination is similar to importance as the right of divorce. That is, for a person to say, "I want to be divorced from a woman," to be divorced from a husband, if it's
yeah,
a relationship, that is empowering in that it gives that person, it allows both people to know that there's a responsibility here, or else I can leave if I want to, and gives that right. So that's what the right of divorce is, and that's what the right of self-determination is. Is you can't treat me like garbage because I have the right to leave if you do. And I agree with that. There was I would read from the quote. I can't find it right now, but I think it's a proper analogy for saying why socialists should support that push towards independence, even if the politics behind it are even right wing, largely, or dominated by the right. That doesn't change the democratic character of it. Not democracy, not bourgeois democratic, but actually democratic in terms of people saying, "No, I want to decide my own future," because that's ultimately what revolution is ultimately about: is workers laying claim to deciding their own future. And if you don't support even in this, I support anything that moves in that direction. That is not to say that Catalonian independence, if it happened, is some sort of step towards socialism. By no stretch of the imagination. The only way we can build socialism is to build that sentiment of internationalism, that sentiment that is for open borders, to crack up nations, and to build a working class fight for that. Catalonian independence doesn't inherently build a working class fight for socialism, but it does lay out for Spanish workers who are being told, "No, we have the right to hold Catalonians captive and maybe not have them speak their language as much," or whatever sort of restrictions we're going to put on them, is to make Spanish workers think they benefit from such a thing. And we have to be clear: there's no benefit there for us. So therefore, you have that right to independence.
mm, 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 yeah. But I will say, if you even talk about this, you'll be if you were here and then you just talk about this, that really.
I'm safely here in San Francisco. Speaking of Catalonian independence, so I'm risking
it's
your
very
neck.
hard.
I'm risking your neck by making my claims.
Yeah, yeah. It's hard to talk about this issue here.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very polarizing.
But
Yeah.
it is the same issue, and it's the same level of um, anxiety and fervor that comes up around our own issues around immigration in this country.
Mm.
Um, uh, I mean, maybe even more fervor there because I don't think there's much of an independence movement. People have talked about California splitting off, but there's no real independence movement in the United States.
Yeah.
So I can see that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's why One other thing before I forget, I wanted to mention that something. I don't know how I was going to segue now because we were talking about some things that reminded me of this uh, Vox again, and that is that they openly endorse the state of Israel, and the party has also appealed to conspiracy theories invoking the figure of Jewish philanthropist George Soros as a mastermind behind Catalan separatists. That's why this came to me because um, because we were talking about independence here and the Catalan separatist movement, and then I just remembered that Vox perpetuates this theory that George Soros here is the mastermind funding this separatist movement.
Right.
And I thought that was, and also the Islamization of Europe. So they perpetuate this, and they have also, I will just also add in there, that also featured some former neo-Nazis and party cadres and lists. Some of them have been expelled from the party or have resigned, but that's in recent times. But they have had them in their campaigns, and so that just came to mind because of George Soros and the separatist movement that we're talking about.
I just want to say that, you know, that point made about George Soros controlling the Catalonian call for independence. No, we can laugh, but the left has its
I'm
own.
sorry, but it's just like it's everywhere. I thought it was just in the USA, but
Right.
I had just read that.
But
It's
the left
also
has
here
its
in
own version of
Spain.
the left has its own version of doing that, right? This is what Kenny was talking about in relationship to Nicaragua. Saying that like the Nicaraguan movement is controlled by the United States and the government, and therefore, and we've had our similar discussions about Hong Kong. You know, like
Right.
Yeah. So it's that is a stick thrown around by the right and by the left, and I've got my. That's not a question I've been able to easily answer for myself about when you call it into play and when you don't, and when it's legitimate, when it's not. I'll be honest. More often than not, I confuse myself. And the similar thing was said about the independence movements in Syria, as who is really behind them, who's controlling them.
Right.
So
yeah.
So it's not. But I will say when your movement calls for an outside force to come in, I don't think of it as independent any longer. But to know when that happens and to know what the character, I think that's a tough call. So I could sit there and be like, well, that's crazy about George Soros. But I just want to point out we in the left have struggled with that same question.
You don't actually believe, though, Andy, that George Soros is funding a Catalan and the separatist.
I don't know what to make of George Soros, but I will say this: I believe that the Catalonian cause goes well before George Soros was running around doing his thing.
That's true.
And That's true. And I believe that there are leftists on the ground who don't think of themselves as connected to that guy or to some, I don't know, that's called a liberal cause. I'm not sure what to make of George Soros and the financing and blah blah blah. But no, I don't believe it. But at the same time, I have been part and subject to that same logic, in which to say, well, that's not an independence cause. So I'm not going to sit there and laugh at it, because this is the thing that the left gets itself into as well. And this is one I'm not going to just throw a stone through their window when I'm sitting in a glass house.
All right. Well, I had brought up because we were talking about the Catalan.
But I believe there's an independent, legitimate cause going on in Catalonia where millions of people hit the streets on September 11th, right? Because that's the day that Franco or whatever, there's some reason for that, September 11th. And that cause is not just George Soros telling people, knocking doors and getting people out there. There's a cause independent of that. But Is it politically independent of larger forces? That I'm not able to speak to.
Yeah.
But the only truly political independent course is one that would call for open borders and does not call for national boundaries being reconstructed in a new way. That's one thing I'll say. That if you aren't looking to form open borders out of your struggle, then your cause politically is subordinated to some sort of capitalist fever dream of thinking that you're going to get somewhere by forming capitalism and reconstructing capitalism in a new way. So that's what I would say.
And that is why I was saying that this separatist movement has to really go beyond identity.
Yes.
I
completely agree. Yeah. And yes, I completely agree. Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
All right. Let's wrap up. My legs are sleeping.
Yeah.
Now, as I'm sitting here cross-legged.
Oh, wow. Well, thank you, Eduardo, for taking the time.
Thank you for getting connected with me. We almost did not have an episode for this week, and I was a little bit, no, we have to have one.
Yeah, you made it happen, so I'm glad about it, and I think there's some good stuff here. Next week, we might be talking more about France.
Yes, I will be there, and I will have, yeah. Let's discuss this later. You don't have to add this, but would it be all right with you if we had someone who we can interview?
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Okay. I'll find someone.
Yeah.
Thank you, Andy, for this.
Yeah.
So our viewers and listeners can find us on any of our five platforms on Bitchute, Stitcher, Google Play, iTunes Podcast, or YouTube. Please subscribe, rate, review, and best of all, share with your family and friends. And we will check you all out next week. And
if you're in Spain and you don't like what Eduardo said, what address can they find you at to get you?
No. I'm sure this will not get traction yet. This will be like in a few years. Yeah. Once people look, they'll be like, "What is that? What he has said?"
Yeah. Well, and again, people should comment. We're getting and subscribe. We're getting some more subscribers on YouTube. Roughly the same, a little bit less subscribers on iTunes. So, but subscribe and comment on these episodes if you like them or don't like them.
Yeah. And then they will respond to the trollers.
I will respond to the troll.
All right, Andy.
All right. Take care, Eduardo.
Thanks. Ciao.
Bye-bye.